Hey, hey, can you hear me, Larry? Are we in?
Yes, sir.
Oh man, gotta love getting pre-rugged before the space even starts.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, right on, right on. Good sound check. I hear you just fine.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, it's love getting pre-rugged, man. Like I went to start the space and it said play space. I'm like, what? No one started it yet. What the hell?
I was wondering what the delay was. I was like, where'd it go?
Just so stupid, man. I don't. I have no
It
idea how that
happens,
happened.
man.
Yeah, Elon's got to keep us on our toes. You see.
That's
So
it,
where are
man.
you in?
That's it.
Where are you in the world now, my friend?
In China, but about to be DC. But I'll be before that. I got to go to Hong Kong, so
Wow.
back to Hong Kong again. Yeah,
Shit, you must
super
be a bit
busy.
tired, bro. You're a champion coming in here in your hours there.
I why I would never fade a friend, especially Mask and yourself, Corey. So
Thanks,
I'm here.
brother. Now you're the man. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of
Well,
things
son, Pat.
going. Yeah, there's a lot. Exactly, there's a lot of things going on. I'm just bringing up Send here. I think Ethan, and Send are back on here.
Nice,
Um,
nice.
but yeah, we'll give everyone a little intro and then dive into some current events and updates with everything. You guys have a lot going on where you're
Sure.
at too, Larry.
Yeah, lots everywhere, man. I yeah, where do we start? I guess before we unpack what's happening in the markets, and I guess I'll introduce myself. Is that what you want me to do, Corey?
Yeah, man. Give yourself an
Yeah.
intro, and then I think Ethan's jumped on too. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, my name is Larry Lundy, and I'm the CSO at Hash AI. I'm the Chief Security Officer at MetaTrust Labs, and now I'm the CBO for one of the largest mining aggregators in the world. That's Hash Power. No, no pun on both the names being so similar, but it's just serendipitous. But been an advisor on the ISO 4200 ethics and AI for the last year, and I've been an advisor on the for HSBC on their gold backed token and quantum chain projects. But more importantly, I'm a friend to the space here and a friend to my friend Corey. So, and Mask Protocol, also partnered with AI, and just good people in here already that I see. So, appreciate you guys having me here on Base Station 11.
Yeah, nice, man. We just crashed through the double digits, which is good with the space base station. And yeah, thanks for joining us, bro. I really appreciate it. You're one of the busiest guys I know, but I have to say, anytime I reach out or something's going on, you've got my back, and I always hope to do that back for you, man. So I appreciate you.
Well, friends are more than just a sum of words. It's how you live it, right? So, you and I are, as I would like to say, real steppers, man. If I say something, when you don't have anything, you just have your name and your word. That's it. So here I am with you, man. So
That's it, brother. And Ethan, my man, and Send. You guys are sending like the updates in the app. How's things going with you, buddy?
What's happening? All is well, bro. Getting excited for this new month coming. I'm excited to start generating revenue and giving that back to token holders. Let's fucking send it.
That's it. It's all about revenue, isn't it?
All about revenue, back to token holders. Fuck a security. Do it right, baby.
That's right. The tides are coming out from that whole area, and we'll see who's swimming with no clothes on, right?
Hey, there you go.
I think we got some other friends in here. Look, we got Action in here. Maybe we'll bring him up. But yeah, lots happening in the space. What's up with this whipsaw action? We got a Trump pump, and then we've got it's coming back. It's retracing. What do you think that means, Larry, for utilities?
I think it's just a softening again. There had to be some good news. We just have to look at the market as a whole for what it is right now. We used to just have four main, old assets or foundational assets, and now we have more than eight, and some of them were called, and there's a retracement. Things have to get paid for, but we've survived a lot.
What do you call the foundational assets? I never heard that term before. What do you say, like
Well,
BTC?
I mean, we just look at, of course, BTC, Ethereum, BNB in the last cycle, and between Solana and AVAX. But now we have the algorithmic tokens or the ISO tokens. We have like, for example, XRP, Ondo, or Hedera. We have Litecoin from time to time, and we have of course Sol, the life sucker of the space, good or bad, depending on the day. So any one of them have the potential to draw out 64% or more of the flexible liquidity in the space, the actionable liquidity. No pun intended on the action man in here, but it's just what moves and shakes the space. But this same liquidity is adjacent to the 7% of adaptation that we had. We had 5% adaptation in 10 years, and now we're at 6.8 technically, but it is definitely 7% in the last election cycle. 6 months took up what 5 years would usually take, and we saw all the progressive market dumps, the testing with the Nisei dump, and then the recurring dumps, based on the market manipulation from institutions and our exchanges and our market makers that have placed us in this regular content of volatility that we're in right now. So if we just look at, again, just the massive amount of liquidity, either from institutional or, even retail, it's just a different space that we're in now. So we should, I shouldn't say that we should expect this, but we should expect this. And now we have way more larger geopolitical considerations to think about that are, again, it's one of the benefits and one of the drawbacks of being in a 24-hour news cycle. When you're in an echo chamber, it's hard to, when your charts are relevant to you, when your holdings are relevant to you so much that it's hard to see the bigger picture sometimes, and we're really in a day-to-day type of environment right now. But it's just, we're all here very early. So I don't think it's anything to get disheartened by. I think that, as I've told everyone for a long time, that, 10 to 30% volatility daily is real. It's not going away. And you shouldn't expect any less with all the large and massive amount of volatility we have in the space right now. So it's going to continue.
Yeah. Does that, I mean, you mentioned geopolitical aspects too. Like, I noticed there's a little bit of, well, not a little bit, a significant amount of rhetoric now around, U.S.-based teams and U.S.-based projects and U.S.-based tokens because they're becoming pro-crypto, like very openly, or at least that's what the narrative is. Do you think that's funny? True?
Yeah, I'll just give you a case precedence on that. China and the UAE, or actually the GCC in general, a lot of the crypto policy that we have now is based on what they wrote together. So if you look at, the special economic zones, you look at Hong Kong now and the Emirates, that's a good example. They kind of had a really good idea early to collateralize and provide, use case for presenting investment, exterior investment. And now we have, the U.S. with the $5 million, golden visa, which is a great idea. You're going to see an inflow of lots of investment dollars. But if you want to look at the bigger context, you can look at, like, for example, and I'm going to use these two use cases right now as two gauges for the market. You look at TCME, one of the largest semiconductor manufacturer in the world, and 40% of Taiwan's GDP at this point right now. They'll never admit that, but I will tell you that this is the case. 40%. They, are investing more than $100 million investment into coming stateside for, to avoid the tariffs. This is, again, one of our allies for America, and a big, kind of a chess piece on the world stage, both within political warfare and geopolitical and economic warfare, and even for what we do in DeFi, right? Because it has direct bearing on AI and data centers and mining, because they are the largest chip producing hub especially for Tensor Core processing. When we talk about NVIDIA, we couldn't have an NVIDIA right now without Taiwan, right? So And you just look at the ebb and flow. You also look at the ebb and flow of like you have, the issue between the Chinese government and the U.S. Treasury right now, where China had been parking its gold as a sign of good faith, and also as a tertiary credit, gesture, since before Xi Jinping, long before that. There's I think 4 premiers ago, or 4 prime ministers before, they had been parking gold in the U.S. And just recently, as of the last 2 days, Chinese government has been asking for its physical gold back. That not all of it; they just want some of it back. And then the U.S. Treasury's response was like, "What gold?" No, I mean, it's
Wait, weren't they just doing that from the Bank of England and by cargo plane back to the States? Or that's probably private holdings.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you an example on that too. I'm happy that you brought that up, because so what happened was a fire sale started, right? So as they say, you follow where the money goes, and the money has to eventually, you can't rob Peter to pay Paul, as they would say, And so what happens when the physical gold is not allotted back to the Chinese government? Well, they start selling treasury bonds. And they do own a considerable amount of U.S. debt, right? So it's a tit for tat, But with all of these tariffs, they did not really, impact both currencies, U.S., stateside and on China, because, what they placed a 15% tariff on liquid gas. I think a lot of these are just for gesture, right? And it's I equate the U.S. and China to a husband and a wife that argue all the time, but they make up all the time, because the rest of the family, which is the world, needs to continue on, business as usual, right? And so I'm happy that you mentioned England, though, because right now, for English people, for people that hold physical gold, unless you're an institution, there's a 3 to 6 month wait to get your physical gold back. I actually talked about that on my space on Saturday, about how most people won't wait that long. If it's a war of attrition, and as I used to have the saying from my father: "As long as I owe you, you'll never go broke." And that's really, I guess, the heartbeat of the world, even in DeFi right now. It's not necessarily bad. It's just, are you going to be strong enough mentally not to, concede into the propaganda, the daily rhetoric, and the artificial softening of the markets? So, we have to look at the centralized exchanges for what they are. They're not in it to help us. There's always this popular sentiment that centralized exchanges are here to help us and to make sure that we're happy, but really they're there to make money at the end of the day, and that's the truth, and the market makers that help them, wash out and I guess perpetuate this cycle. You have to remember, like, it's just like real banking and general retail and real business. Who is the exit liquidity? It's retail. Who is the end consumer, and also the main stairway or the main leverage point for business. It's retail. It's us. The small guy.
So there's a small message in there to self-custody is still king, huh? Even with physical metals.
I think that there lies the whole movement. Like, you can see, for example, like on tokens like Hash AI, yeah, we have a few exchanges, right? But even with our market cap compared to other protocols and other, that have similar market caps or whatever, if you look at our volume and you look at our transaction volumes, 60 to 70% still on Uniswap. That's telling, because that means, people do have the choice to use. I mean, there are a few exceptions, like, geographical or political or policy restrictions that limit access to some of these centralized exchanges. But on the up and up, though, even with fees before, people still chose to use Uniswap mostly, and that's because the importance of peer-to-peer exchange, and I think at some point it's going to be where digital wallets and people are going to be, exchanging thoughts on, or have the choice to just use a peer-to-peer. If someone has those digital assets or they have the remunerator you want, then why choose a centralized exchange? And I think this is an important narrative for decentralization in the future.
Well, that's why Send is existing, right? So, I mean, Ethan, what do you think about that statement? Peer-to-peer being king, right? Even bypassing exchanges, you just go peer-to-peer. Send it, baby.
Yeah, did you guys see that thing yesterday? Talking the CEO from Tether talking about that. Stable coins are not even going to be here not in a few years, but in 10. I mean, who knows how long out? 20, 30, 40 years. But BTC will be the king. But I think there's going to exist assets like Send that people, if there's sufficient liquidity there, that they're going to go ahead and pay each other with Send. I mean, people are already doing it in Nigeria, but it's the same thing. If you have liquidity that you can trade into, whether Send is paired with BTC or currently like it is now paired with USDC, that people will go ahead and pay each other in Send as long as they can cash out. But yeah, everything's self-custodial. And actually earlier I was looking at, before we got on, about people starting to buy real-world assets on chain, tokens, stocks like Coin and stocks like Hood. So I'm excited about that as well.
Well, before the Luna crash and all the implosion, one of the coolest apps or platforms that I saw that I used quite a bit, and I thought it was really cool. You guys remember? I think it was Mirror Protocol, where it was like tokenized stocks, and you could do like delta neutral strategies. It had leverage built in, which I didn't really mess with, but you could essentially like pair strategies and buying stocks, and you paired it against LP to hedge against up and downs. It was like quite crazy, and they had somehow matched it up algorithmically to match pretty close to the real stock price. It was pretty cool, man. But it's funny you mentioned Tether too, Larry. I just saw Binance did their announcement. They're delisting for the EEA all the non-MiCA stable coins that aren't compliant, and guess who remains? Just USDC and D Euro. I think they even delisted PaxG, bro.
I'm going to take a dive into that since it's my wheelhouse. So you don't have to worry about Tether going anywhere, and I'll tell you why.
Oh yeah,
they just hired a CFO, by the way, too.
Who?
What's that?
They just hired a CFO or something like that to do all this stuff to get them all in line with their regulatory whatever.
Well, it goes beyond that though as well. Like Tether, you're looking at BTC couldn't exist, on ramping or off ramping or fractionalizing at all without USDT. USDT was one of the main reasons why USDT exists, right? And when we talk about stable tokens, locked TVL wise, Tether is the second largest locked TVL. Unofficially, it may be the largest because, as you know, I think like 90% of the transactions still rely on Tether, even with MiCA regulations and a couple exchanges delisting, for policy considerations. It's not really affecting the daily volume because, again, Tether is a good example of what I call a hybrid asset. And I've done a couple spaces and a couple papers on this recently, where it was the first collateralized hybrid asset. It combines best of both. I mean, TradFi and DeFi, and provided a liquidity bridge. And it's still the number one financial instrument in the world as far as like Corey just mentioned, Mirror. Well, what were all those side pools that leveraged and provided the price stability? It was on USDT. And if you go anywhere around the world, USDT is still king, regardless of the MiCA the policy laid out by MiCA for the EU, etc.
Tron.
Yeah. Yeah. Tron is.
Yeah, that move was crazy. That move was crazy. Everyone laughed about it because obviously Justin Sun himself he's like the king marketer figuhead. Well, and he's, Alibaba's brainchild,
Well, he was just in the right place at the right time. He is important because he did proliferate USDT off of Tron. But the bigger stories like how they marketed Tron before. I tell the story because it's true. Before Tron, there's some people that were really down. Not there always is people that are down, but Tron used to actually give you like Litecoin and many of the other digital assets, but especially with Tron, you show up every day and you do these surveys and participate, and they would give you free Tron that you could cash out on USDT, and it really allowed a lot of people that were destitute to live, right? And some of them came up in this space that way.
Wow, sounds like something familiar that I know about. Go ahead.
Well, but I was gonna tell you that as far as Tron is concerned, I mean not Tron but USDT. Firstly, they have patented and trademarked a layer 2 to layer 3 solution called Hadron. It's the first universal tokenization platform for real world assets and for tangible or physical assets. And they're developing USDT 0, which is a layer and policy agnostic stable token to meet compliance. So, yeah, they have signed up a CFO, mostly just for a compliance officer, but like similar to what Binance did. But they only have 165 employees to do what 40,000 plus employees need to for like JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs.
Right.
Yeah. It's nuts. I think they have the highest profit per employee in any company in the entire world.
Well, it goes beyond that. With Tether, you're getting again second highest locked TVL and 80%. But there's something called the float group, and the float group is made up of JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Standard Chartered, all of these banks, and these are the same banks that are in line with using XRP, have signed all the MOUs with XRP, including UnionPay and SWIFT. So if you dive even deeper, you'll see the connection between Ondo and BlackRock to XRP, and then back to Tether. So they're not going anywhere. And if it's ironic but it's also not ironic that in the beginning we had such a big push from Circle and USDC. They only make up 20% of the stable volume on any given day. And one of the largest investors from an institution is actually the U.S. government. They are, if you compare their holdings of USDT versus, this is a speculation, but I would say that it's a highly educated speculation that even the DoD and the State Department have pretty decent holdings of USDT. Yeah. But beyond that, though, again, we talk about stables and there's the magic word depegging, right? If you look at the structure of Tether and USDT versus USDC, Deloitte gives an audit monthly about USDC, but that doesn't mean that it's transparent or neither highly, ethical. Far from it. They're very much from traditional finance, mostly from banking at Circle. I'm not saying there's not good people there, because at one point I was asked to come on and work over there, which I was, I thought was a great thing at the time until and I still think it's just business, right? At the end of the day, but they are on a 1-to-1 back to dollar. They buy a lot of like treasury bonds or what I call junk paper to back the dollar. And I'm going to give some context to that. But USDT is 80% backed on junk paper, but 20% is based on, some, I would call them higher risk assets, right? But they are scalable. They're assets that are scalable that will give a higher return. What does that do? It gives you more stability on Tether, right? No, they don't have an audit from Deloitte every month that lets you know the status of Tether. But if we go into history of stable tokens, USDT has never really depegged, but BUSD and USDC have both depegged more than 12 to 16% over more than a week's time. And to be perfectly honest, stables depeg a little bit every day, but they never truly go below 99 cents. That's supposed to be the golden standard. But we've seen them all go to 98, 97%, but not lose, 12, 16% for 2 weeks. And, they blamed on the depeg on USDC, the long-term depeg on USDC, they blamed on, the Silicon Valley Bank and debacle, but it was far more than that. So I just want to educate people when they talk about, there's so much, what USDC has done well has, partnered up with, Ethereum for quite some time. They helped them push the narrative because even the Ethereum Foundation at the time didn't know, actually. It just looked really good on paper at the backing of, of some of the financial institutions. But it's funny, like something that an exchange like a Bitcoin or a Binance would never go near has, they have a strategic partnership. But now if you look at the exchanges, they just buy up and sell whatever is carrying the narrative. They make their profit and then they use us to retrace back. So, but those are some real reality facts on Tether and USDC and Circle, because people need to know about that. And I don't care which stable you choose, but it probably would behoove you to diversify your holdings, no financial advice, so that you have that flexible vehicle to come in and out of your trading or your even just your daily needs. For I know that Ethan was mentioning Nigeria. Send and USDT are a lifeline in Nigeria. I did a talk recently at Consensus 2025 in Hong Kong on stable token policy, but beyond that, I call them hybrid asset. And that the bigger picture is even with the CEO of Tether saying that, Bitcoin will remain and the dust will settle. But at the end of the day, it's providing a lifeline. As far as like in Nigeria, the Naira is so inflationary that there has to be some type of deflationary mechanism to bring balance and buying power. So that's my little 10 cents. It's a long 10 cents, but I just wanted to give context for what we're talking about.
I want to get your thoughts on because you mentioned about Tron, which was pretty interesting to me because I've been reading Chris Dixon's about how tokens are used to bootstrap network usage, and I want to get your thoughts. So Tron, what did they do? They gave people USDT for completing questionnaires. We have this reward system in Send where you register a Send tag, which is username. You hold a minimum amount of Send, and then if you're sending and referring people, you get additional Send. What are your thoughts on Pi? Have you looked into Pi at all? And how many?
Yeah, I mean, Pi's been around for a long time. They still did two of the largest raises, and it's a proof of work. Well, kind of a hybrid proof of work. And it depends on who you ask. Some people think, and some governments are extremely against the Pi narrative, and other people will tell you that's the next big thing. So I don't have any skin in the game in that, but I do think that some of the things that they had done are pretty innovative, and I do know that from the raises that they were massive. They haven't really spent that much, and the liquidity is locked, and they've been fairly transparent, but they have a lot of pushback from governments.
How much have they raised?
I think it was like 50 billion or something like that.
50 billion.
I can't remember exactly. That's 15 billion. I'm sorry, 15 billion. Yeah.
And what would you say? Yeah. Why are governments against it, and then why do other people say it's innovative? Like because you can mine from your phone?
Well, yeah. I mean, that was it was one thing to empower people to have ability to on ramp and off ramp and have remittance and payment settlement on a digital device. We can see how much it's empowered people, like you said, for example, in Nigeria, in the Cambodias and the Vietnams of the world early on, and then for example, Indonesia, where cultural and religious restrictions don't allow most people to bank, but they still need the ability to remit and to have democratization in their financial assets, right? Without banking, right? But And then if you look at mining, I mean, that was the next plausible big move. And you look at, there are things coming to market that are similar, and PyChain, like, it just goes back to the grassroots level of proof of work. We talk about, let's face it, in DeFi, well, a lot of tokens are crowdfunding, and then in an ethical situation, it's just you wait your turn to take some profit, and it recycles itself, right? But with proof of work mining, the whole message was that you have a liquidity pool based on a renewable resource that you continue to extract, and then it creates a cyclic economy or environment to where people it can be somewhat victimless, but. And so if you did that on a mobile device, and a lot of those ideas were networked off of Pi, but if you want to talk about decentralization, it might be one of the main, I guess, thesis carriers for that whole mine, extract, sell. It really would give you maybe a cyclic economy. But so, I mean, nation state governments don't want that to a certain extent. They like this happy compromise that we're entering into, where we're not going to have that many 50 or 100 X's anymore, but we're going to have lots of 2 and 3 X's, and then shorter periods of time. That's more manageable for TradFi or centralized finance. They can put a lid on that. But PyChain, yeah, I mean, like there are people that are super resistant to its adaptation, just like people were super resistant to Bitcoin. We have Kramerisms for that. That, and it's just funny. Like if you watch videos and tapes of Kramer, and even there's so many people I could name from mainstream media, but they were so against it, and then post-election narrative, they're riding it like it's their Kool-Aid. So. It's just funny, different strokes for different folks, but when the weather is good, everyone's on board, So I think PyChain might be that way too. I'm not endorsing PyChain, but I do have friends that are heavy into PyChain. Like, some of you might know Rudes from Rudes Crypto Lounge. He's an early validator and also an early miner as well. And
what
good friend of mine.
Are we talking about the same thing, PyChain and ID, the mobile app?
I mean, isn't it one and the same?
Are they? Yeah, I guess they call it PyChain. I never heard that.
I think that's the underlying protocol chain, the proof of work.
Yeah,
but Pi Network. Pi Network is the app.
Yeah, it's their main net. So, yeah, and it's just funny, man. The world is funny. People want to know why Ethereum price is so down and Vitalik doesn't have control. Sometimes, that's another pie I can, no pun intended, I can step into. It's a turd pie, but just it's the world is changing, man. But we got to give credit where credit's due. Yeah, I'm a Ethereum maxi. I have been since proof of work time, but it's the world is changing quickly, so not all for the better, but it is what it is. So, like when we talk about the space, as Birdman would say, you got to put some respect on their name. You got to put respect on Tether, and you got to put some respect on Ethereum, because both, respectively, 80 or 90% of what happens in the market touches Ethereum or Tether one way. And I think it's really funny when people shit talk USDT. There's an important distinction that's made, because a lot of the rhetoric is self-serving. So there's a really big separation. They'll say USDT all day, but they won't mention Tether. There's probably a reason for that. If you really look at the macros and you look at the statements, they're always carefully, really, crafted. It's easy to have a heel, just like in like pro wrestling or a comic book, you have to have a heel. It's easy to make USDT a heel, right? But you wouldn't talk about like Vince McMahon they wouldn't shit talk Vince McMahon, They'd say that these guys are the bad guys, but they would, it's just like with Tether. You can't, because the space relies. You have, transactions peer to peer that are bigger than countries' GDPs. You used to see them on Whale Watch all the time. Now you see quietly the meta and the data from Whale Watch not be so readily available these days. And there's probably a reason for that. It's funny that you have all of these huge transactions on Bitcoin from like MicroStrategy, Grayscale, BlackRock, etc. All these financial institutions, but you don't see the needle go up very much on Bitcoin other than the last couple of days after this announcement. It's because people are already doing what we're talking about, transacting peer-to-peer on an order book. They can prolong the profit spread or the discount spread where they're sharing the discount. And so the little known fact on large volume transactions on Bitcoin OTC, which still accounts for about half. Most people are not going to use exchanges, or if they are, they're going to pay the fee and use Binance kind of pioneered some of the custodial and the escrow systems for these long order book transactions, where it won't impact the charts, but they can keep the profit or the spread, as I would say, between the groups that are involved in the OTC of the Bitcoin. So important notice with all of that Bitcoin transaction prior to this liquidity event that we had on the news of the digital asset reserve for the government. It's funny that a lot of that profit had already been taken up, and we have a couple crumbs left over.
Yeah, right. Yeah, those big exchanges, they're not going to be, people who are billionaires aren't going to want to pay like 0.5% to an exchange. They're going to go OTC and TWAP it with a private broker, stream the trade, I guess you'd say, with large volume and offset the slippage.
Well, it's all going to be banking based. That's why that all of the top banks have all jumped on the bandwagon with Ripple and XRP. They've signed all these MOUs of cooperation because they know that it's going to provide the financial instrument, the vehicle for, the legacy banking. So lots of these ways to make money are going to slowly slip away. And you just, again, if you can, I'm okay with making 2 or 3%, if I was trading, or just continue to mine, it's okay. I'm okay as long as the space is sustainable, but the one big thing is I always say this, as an individual, you're kind of an annoyance, or an extremist, but as with group consensus, with large groups of people like here, putting their minds and their attitudes together to say that, no, we just won't use it. That's a big enough influence or confluence to kind of change the direction of the market. Because, again, we wouldn't be this far if we didn't have this pioneering attitude and this ability to kind of, think on our own, kind of having those Orwellian groupthink intentions, Yeah,
that's right. What do they say? I saw going around on X. The Overton window has shifted. You get these cliche narrative statements that just pass through, But,
yeah, Ethan, I'd like to hear more about Send as well, So I didn't get the pitch on that yet.
Yeah,
but, it sounds very interesting to me.
You want the pitch? Let me give it to you. It's a good one. Send is a peer-to-peer non-custodial money app. We started off on ETH mainnet with the helps, we were going to move to Base because we want to ride that Coinbase and Base narrative. But they weren't live yet. We probably should have waited, but we moved to Base in about a year ago. And we have a token. We started a token, and Send has some of the best intellectual property in crypto. And that's kind of what we started with. We knew that kind of going into the age of AI, how do you differentiate yourself from everybody else if it's not code, and if everybody's building as fast as they can, right? How do you differentiate yourself? And we think we do that with brand, especially with stablecoins coming, at being ingrained in everything. So we own Send.it. We purchased that from the same guy that sold Pin.it to Pinterest. He sold Pin.it to Pinterest in 2012. We bought that. That was one of the first acquisitions we made from him, one of the first acquisitions that we did for the brand. So we own Send.it, probably a top 5 domain in crypto. We own about 2 months later after that, in 2023, August after. So we launched our token in June 28th of 2023. Purchased that domain. 2 months later, we picked up the Send handle on X. I got that by messaging the guy, and he sold it to us for $4,500, and I kind of got lucky on that, so timing. And then 4 months later after that, in November, we purchased the send.app domain. And this is a domain that I was looking at for a long time. I had been going to the site. So I went to the site and seeing that it was that somebody had already bought it. So I reached out to them and said, damn. And they said, you know what, this buyer has gone, they've gone quiet. So, it's yours to purchase if you want. So we picked that up for $45,000. It's one of the top 10 .app domains ever sold. And then about 10 months after that, so September of 2024, so about 6 months ago, we just got our registration for Send, covering all aspects of cryptocurrency with the USPTO. And this is a trademark that I had been watching for 2 years. The trademark that we have was previously owned or previously being registered by Silvergate Bank. Silvergate Bank bought their assets from Diem or from Facebook. Remember Diem and Libra? So they bought their assets from them, which was, was going to deal with stablecoins. It was a payments network. And their internal network was called Sen, S-E-N. And I have a feeling that what they were going to do is they were going to rebrand this whole Libra and Diem thing to be Send. But when they dropped the ball, or when they shut down in February of 2023, that's when so about 6 months later, during our TGE, so June, July of 2023, I had been looking at this trademark probably on the monthly because we had another brand that was a staking company called Send Nodes. And so I wanted to own this brand Send, and specifically I wanted to own it for payments. So I seen that it was abandoned, and that's when I went to register it. So it took about 15 months to get it registered with the USPTO and live. So that's kind of it for the brand. That's kind of our fourth stack. But if you see our latest post that's pinned is, we going back to the Chris Dixon is, we think tokens are, it drives network growth, right? So how do we do that and drive network growth to the app? And kind of first it started off with registering a SendTag. I'm not I'm an ETH maxi, but I'm not an ENS maxi. I don't think ENS has really done anything for the space. The only thing they've done is pretty much taken people's, but what have they built on top of ENS? They haven't done shit. So with SendTags, and here's the key. So when someone, and I'll go into some more things, but when someone registers a SendTag, they have a chance to put in an affiliate. So if you look at our pricing for SendTags, it's 2, 4, 8, and 16. So you have a 16 is a 1 to 3 character, 8 is a 4 character, 5 is is 4 USDC, and then 6 characters are 2. Now, the thing that we're pioneering here and what we're doing than anybody else in kind of in the space in general is we think that affiliate marketing is the future of on-chain marketing. So when someone registers a SendTag, there's a chance to put a referral code into that spot. When you're registering, you can fill it into the form. Now, the affiliate, also known as the upline, gets 75% of the cash back on the SendTag. Okay, so you go and register, Larry, which is a 5-character SendTag. That's going to be, 4 USDC. If you put my referral code 3 or Kyrie's, Kyrie actually has the ETH SendTag, ETH. So if you were to put ETH, he would get on chain, he would get the referral credit, and he would forever be your upline. And then he would also get the 75% cash back. So he would get 3 to his wallet. And that all happens on chain. And currently, we've brought in over 50,000 from SendTag, but just going back to, let's say, January 17th, let's call it about 46, 47 days here, affiliates have made over $7,500 from SendTag registrations, while we've brought in about $2,500 from SendTag registrations. And the idea is that anytime your downline is spending or earning, whether it's through swaps, whether it's through our Earn program that we're going to launch, or whether it's through SendTag registrations or whatever else, we used to do memberships where it's $4 a month and we can give 25% of that to the upline, right? Anytime your affiliate or your downline is spending or earning, you as the affiliate are going to get a cut of that. And that's all going to be on chain. Once the payment happens, you will get paid. And we've already had a lot of success with that. So, there's a few things at play here. There's with Send, everybody's doing stable coins. Our UI and our UX, and obviously the brand is kind of second to none. I think our brand is some of the best in the game. So we have SendTags, and then we have affiliates, and then the kind of the last part of that stack. I don't know if you've seen, Brian Armstrong, he said, he thinks that this next 10 years is going to be where payments really take off. Whereas 10 years ago, he thought when he started Coinbase that he wanted to do payments, and it wasn't payments, it was trading, right? So in order to have payments now, you need kind of the 4 stack, which is, a network like Base, which is a layer 2 that's fast, right, and cheap, transactions under a second, under a cent. You need a stablecoin USDC. You need passkeys or smart accounts, which we have. And then you need a naming system. So that's kind of, we've gone from that 4 to what we have now, which is, send tags, rewards, and affiliates. And then we go from that to launching products on top of it, which is like send, earn, or, obviously peer-to-peer sending is easy to send tags. And then we have, send swap, which, same thing, right? Where you're just basically just swapping in the wallet. But we're kind of going down this track of becoming a neobank. We're basically an on-chain neobank, right, with a really good brand. But going back to the rewards, the last part of it, because I like to say that that's pretty much our stack right now is in the product is affiliates, send tags, and rewards. So rewards is important because what you're doing is you're bootstrapping the network. If you look up Chris Dixon token on Google, that article pop up, which is really good. And again, read our pinned message about that. We've been giving we've given out, so we've had 12 distribution rounds, and when we first started, it was you would get send for holding send, right? And it was 3 rounds of, or I think it was maybe 5 or 6 rounds of that. You get send and hold send, and we you don't have to stake anything, so you don't have to put your wallet up. But what we do is we just take a snapshot, right? So we take a snapshot, boom, and then you can go in the wallet and claim it, right? And to do that, you had to hold a minimum amount of send, and then you had to register 1 send tag. So boom, in order for them to qualify this, they're going in, they're registering send tag. So now we're bringing in revenue. Like I said, we've brought in over $50,000-$60,000 in send tag revenue, and this is coming to us. This is directly from, not even going to affiliates. But we didn't have the affiliate program the whole time. So now they're doing activities, right? So the activities that we have are, you can refer someone and increase your multiplier. And then you can send 10 sends, and that's going to get, that's going to check off that task. And then you can send 100 sends. So meaning you can send to 100 different send tags, right? It has to be a unique send tag. You can't send to the same tag and just kind of spam it like that. It has to be. So now what we're doing is we're increasing network usage, right? And I think this network usage is going to be important because, Optimism is doing a grant, and I think we're probably going to end up picking some of that grant money. But now we're going to switch over, and if you read the article, we're switching over now to say, okay, now that we have swaps and earn coming, or we want people to deposit USDC into the app, which we have Apple Pay, where you can deposit with Coinbase on-ramp. So now we're trying to get our USDC deposit up, right? And now we're trying to get our total value locked with send earn. And now we're trying to increase our trading volume, right? And we're going to start giving send rewards out for all of these things. Not just send is for sending, but people actually driving revenue to the product. And, there was that whole points meta, right? You're going to get points. We don't believe in that. We believe in everything should be on chain. Everything should have a token, but that doesn't mean everyone should have a token. We take our token very seriously. Our financials are dialed in. Our tokenomics are dialed in. This is something that we watch like a hawk. But I think we have some of the best tokenomics in the game, and we have one of the best rewards programs in the game for a stablecoin payments app. And when you're looking at something that you want to compete with basically credit cards points, right? How do you compete with, how does a stablecoin, how do we get people off of the duopoly that is MasterCard and Visa? The first part is you give them points, right? You get them, try to get them to send peer-to-peer or spend money peer-to-peer, right? And you give them points, and you get them to kind of replace their bank. And then maybe you can give them a card within the app where they can, spend their stables. And then the next part of that is can you do lending, right? Can you do lending on chain and give them a card to where they can spend? And then the third part of this is you get the merchant to onboard the retail and get them to stop using stop accepting cards, but you get them to basically be, you can be an affiliate for all of your retail customers. If I'm a taco stand or I run, a farmer's market, that's my chance to onboard everybody into Send, right? And what's the power of onboarding people into Send is it's passive income. It's all of your downlines when they're spending or earning, you're going to make money as their upline. And that's kind of okay saying, hey, you know what, get your people to get off of MasterCard and Visa. That's kind of how I see it playing out. But you need a rewards program that's going to compete with credit cards. And, you know, it's important to do everything in the right order. That's the pitch.
Pretty thorough. I mean, what I do like is weaponizing your network, task driven, the funnel is pretty, I think it's a great idea. And, brand, co-stacking with your IP. But, it's funny. One of the biggest growing segments, I actually did talk with, on the stage with the I guess, architect of design at Alibaba Cloud Systems for Quen, the Deep Brain event at the Cyberport in Hong Kong. And we're both discussing one of the largest growing markets potentially from DeFi and Web3 is it used to be that we'd have to assign a dollar amount to attract commerce or potential users from Web 1 and Web 2. But now it's the reverse where, now there's a dollar amount being applied to what will it take to get someone in from, Web 3 back to Web 1 and Web 2. So I think there's probably a lot of potential there for Send with its, task-oriented networking. So, that's a great way to weaponize a funnel or a commodity, structure coming in. So I think that's pretty cool. But I just wanted to kind of add that it's funny that we live in a time now where now there's a dollar amount being assigned on how do we get more, plausible users from Web 3 back into Web 1 and Web 2 because the average ticket size and liquidity is there, right? So it's amazing how the mighty have fallen, I guess, So I think it's a good time for your protocols. So yeah.
What do you think it takes to get to retail? Crypto is just such a big circle jerk. What do you think it takes to get retail? I'm talking like
if you wanted to really send it, no pun intended.
I've not been thinking about it. I've been thinking about it, but I'm going to do this I'm going to start holding like seminars and onboarding sessions like they do. I don't know. Where are you from, Larry?
It's one of the best ways. From the organic level, I think it's good to be out there on the campaign trail and let people meet you. I'm going back to Hong Kong before I head to DC.
Right.
I'm heading to DC for this impending. There's a bunch of events that are going to happen in DC and a lot of meetings, but before that, I got to go back to Hong Kong. I have more business with HSBC Standard Charter, and I'll be actually meeting with their for what I'm doing, my end of the business. A lot of people want to meet and break bread with you. So I have a meeting with the FDC for Hong Kong government, their futures and their data authority. I have a couple meetings with them, and then I have a meeting with a couple insurance VCs and some home offices. And for me, I think for Send It, I think that's probably one of the best ways to really aggregate like mainstream growth is like what names can you put behind Send, and that's going to be so many TradFi institutions want to get into Web3 deep, right? So I think this is one of the ways that you can kind of proliferate Send is just by going to some of these events and networking who you know.
I'm not the best at partnerships. I do wonder what our partnerships would look like and somebody to put behind our brand and say, like even at like a banking partner, right? We know Sutton Bank is pretty big. They power.
For example, I could think of this use case for Send It. If you got in touch with a gaming company, even just as on an MOU, and then you develop that MOU into like, okay, we're going to use Send It as the main funnel for payments or for incentivization, like just like Starbucks reward members cards. I think Send It. That's actually one of the largest VCs in the world. is when you preload those member cards for that discount that, they're paying pennies on the dollar, and they're able to reinvest and repurpose all that flexible liquidity. It's huge, And I think Send It, if you partner with a good gaming platform, because it's a really lowest barrier of entry. Everyone loves gaming, and it's unassuming, and it allows very high level tasks to be performed because people are willing to do them because they think they're just playing a game at that point. Why not? Could you imagine Send It partnered with Niantic on Pokemon Go, and to give a third or fourth payment option rail or a monetized task to earn? I mean, that'd be huge, right? So
Yeah, imagine buying your Fortnite skins with Send or USDC.
Yeah, a monetized task to earn. That's pretty cool. If we could do so, we can grow your network by getting them to do tasks and earn Send within our wallet.
And you could also, and then you could also see the plausible revenue stream that would come in from just third and fourth party market integrators. Like people that want to get on your timeline. On the actual the ad revenue, and then also just the mine data. So we're talking about mining. I mean, that's what we want to look at. Like 30 or 40% of Tesla's revenue, it's their protected data that they're mining when you're in their vehicles, and they're aggregating all that data, and then they have all the perfect beta and the metrics for not just themselves, but all the second and third party products that Elon is putting into, including, like, if you want to look at the largest, it'd be Twitter, it'd be X. What a mining aggregator there is there. And whether you know it or not, we're performing and providing both tasks and mine data daily. It's just not monetized,
Yeah, that's powering Grok. That's what XAI is harvesting to power Grok and all this stuff, man.
Exactly. Yeah. So with Send, with all the proprietary IP you have on all the branding, I think it'd be easier to do, than most.
Yeah.
Just my 10 cents.
Yeah, I like your 10 cents. You're definitely one of the smartest people I've met in the space. You really understand things. Why
do you think I got him on here, Ethan?
How'd you guys meet?
Oh man. Well, we met. I think we touched bases a long time ago in the last school, actually, to be honest. But later on, was it through Action?
Yeah, our main man's here, actually. Let's bring him up. He because we got a little bit more time. I think he teed us up to talk Hash AI and partnering there, I think.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And Hash AI is doing big things as well. So I'm fortunate enough to have been there with my team, and the founders are great guys, and I have quite a bit of IP on democratized mining. We have a trademarked technology and framework coming out called a PMT, the Personal Mining Terminal. So let that flourish on real world asset integration at the touch of your mobile device. Just like we're talking about.
Listen to those, those are catchy slogans, my friend. It's very good.
Yeah, I like branding too. So I'm all about, I can associate a lot of the things that have been done, feelings aside, cultural imperatives aside, and politics aside. I really like that we do have a savvy businessman for a president. I'm an American, so I can say that, but if you look at the framework for the world, it actually sparked a global narrative that we're on now. But to be fair, this narrative has been happening for the last 10 years. People, just TradFi has never wanted you really to know. They wanted to take. This is one of the biggest things that kills people in the space and in general is ego and arrogance. If you're set that you know everything on any given day, which I don't know shit on any given day, but I listen and I learn, and then I put my 10 cents in, as I would say, then you can continue to grow. You might not win every day, but as long as you can walk and eat and provide for yourself, then it's another day, another lesson learned, So
that's it. I still have to, make some reconnect with some people too, like that are in our circles about a lot of that stuff. And
Well,
yeah, it's
we're
a
going to
key
do that.
emphasis.
We're going to do that in New Zealand, man. We're going to, New Zealand is actually a great place to do DeFi and crypto. Little known fact, I have some friends that are huge project builders. It's funny, they're in the UK. The UK has some of the most non-conducive policies, but last bull cycle till now, some of the largest protocols in the space are based out of the UK. Some of the biggest builders, So it's funny. I think that the cost of living there, et cetera, taxes, but there is a saying though that follow the money, and costs beget gains, right? So I think it's what you're willing to spend, where you're willing to go with it, So we got to have that crypto sanctuary in New Zealand, and have that week long meeting of the minds, that VIP elite builders club in Auckland.
I think I got to do it. Auckland would be just one stop though. Like that's not the real New Zealand, bro. That's the big city life, and then we would escape that again. Second level Inception. Yeah. Queenstown would probably be nice, or
some of the best fishing in the world in New Zealand.
Yeah, man. No, we can go down to one of the lakes down actually outside of Queenstown. You know who lives down there quietly hiding in his compound for various reasons we know is Kim.com. He's got his compound down here. Yeah.
Yeah, he probably wants to be left alone at this point.
Oh yeah. He's still escaping extradition,
Yeah, privacy is important. Mask, check it out. I might be tuning in on Mask browser right now. So,
oh, there you go, man. Yeah, no, we just before we run out of time, I just wanted to give a little update to our communities as well. We've still been getting kind of like blocked in the review on our extensions. So what we're going to do is, we feel like everyone's waited enough. We're going to release a community edition, I guess you could call it, where you can just manually add the extension to your Chrome or your Chrome-based browser and use everything we built while we keep our appeal process going. It's not a major thing. They're just saying that they think we are acting as a wallet as well as a VPN extension. And we're like, no, there's no wallet function in our app, in our extension app. So we're moving through that. We're confident we'll get through it. But we want everyone to know you'll be able to use the extension real soon. Even if it's not officially through the Chrome Web Store, we'll provide all the details and source and all that. And get it out there, because we've been waiting long enough. And privacy is important. And, one thing I noticed too, I don't know if anyone spotted it, just in a bit of privacy news as well, Firefox recently changed their terms of use cleverly. Yeah. And they've put, they used to have this phrase at the bottom of their thing that said, unlike many companies out there these days, we don't sell your data. Guess what they did? They committed a change to that line and took it out.
Oh, yeah.
It's open on their GitHub.
You got to love Broadcom. If you're on Azure or AWS, you're subject to that same retrieval of your data any given time by any of the agencies or nation states of the world based on their need, right? So people, even though AWS especially has put so much money in the space and tries to aggregate, it's like a double-edged sword. For that, $100,000 grant or the $20,000 grant, they're going to take $1 million of mine data from you and allow your business to be whoever it wants to be or who is willing to pay, right? So, when that decision, that's why privacy is so important in democratization of your data. So, if you want to stick it to the man in your own small way, browse privately. It's an ongoing battle, but it's something I really truly believe in. I think that's what Mask and HashAI have in common is Mask is doing it on the network side and Hash is doing it on the hardware-based side. So
the mining.
Approaches of privacy and deep in. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, man. And I think it's just the transparency to the customer that the paradigm's shifting a little bit where people like convenience, right? We've talked about this a lot. I mean, heck, that's why I use probably SendApp more than some of my other banking apps, one, because it's fun. It's amazing branding. But if I know a company's going to sell my data and they tell me, and I have a chance to earn from it, I may consider turning that on, right? It's where they do it by stealth, and it's not privacy by default. You have to opt out of them selling all of your personal data. It's just, we all know it's wrong. It's just, it takes time to really proliferate that fundamental change and then give it an apps that are nice to use.
I like the slashes, in front of all the Send It people. It's a good way to show the solidarity. I think that's pretty cool, in front of their own businesses. And I just think right now people might think it's really in its infancy, but I really want you to pay attention to what I was talking about. Since you guys are here listening for Send It is, it's the reverse paradigm of Web 1 and Web 2 now reaching into Web 3. Because again, this is where all the liquidity is at. I want to give you another fact of context that you guys can kind of help explain when you pitch an acolyte or you pitch a business or a networking opportunity. Is there's a reason why Treasury bonds and Federal Reserve bonds, the report was so poor from the Treasury. And it's not because of the economy itself. It's because 60% of that liquidity came into DeFi during the election cycle, right? That's the truth. So when you go to explain for context, when you have these high-level business meetings, you can just easily explain, well, we're in a situation now where it's cool to be in Web 3 and now Web 1 and Web 2, and just basically all the layers are trying to figure out how can we extract these people or these potential customers from Web 3 back into Web 1 and Web 2, and now the dollar amount's being effectuated to that. And you can just say that, for a workflow or for a consumer CRM, a consumer funnel, Send is really a good way to have as a flexible user funnel while you're monetizing the process, right? And propagating your own business. So just a couple words from my analysis of what Ethan kind of explained to me in his pitch. I like some of that they're using, tasks to mediate the networking, in real time. And then you get passive income at the same time. So I made Send It. I followed Send It or Send the main Send. Ethan, if you want to have talks with me and Corey in back chat or whatever, I'm mostly involved in policy side stuff. So I am the chief strategy officer at HashAI and the chief security officer at MetaTrust, and now the CBO at HashPower. But one of the biggest jobs I do is just policy side and stable token policy. That's why I'm going back to Hong Kong again on the 7th. So if you guys anyone's in Hong Kong on the 7th, I'll be meeting with the FTC authority for the Hong Kong government there for a couple meetings. And yeah, just get at me if you're out there, and then I'm heading to DC and be stateside for a little while. So
I'm going to take you up on that. Kyrie's probably, he's one of my one of my top friends in crypto. Someone that I really, just has good character and morals. And I know that if he's talking about you, that you have the same, but you don't meet too many people like Kyrie in here. So I'm going to take you up on that for sure.
No, again, and I see Action down there. Like, we wouldn't have reconnected if Action didn't make the introduction, and it was really good. Good. I mean, it's good people, man. That's the. No matter how ugly the space gets, and the rest of the world's comings and goings of bad news and the daily narrative, good people let you know that the day's going to be all right. And it's what makes the space both educational and also worthwhile, and like I like what you said about having Corey as one of your best friends in crypto or DeFi, but now it's just mainstream. So we could just say he's one of your best friends in your day to day, right? And that's how I see some of the people in
here.
Hell
yeah, bro. Hell yeah. I like that. I like the sound of that. Kyrie, you're my best friend, bro.
We got a lot of good people.
I bet
here.
he started a movement too, Larry. Ethan has started a movement called the Shirtless Devs, the Shirtless Founders. And so when we try to build, we all would just, doesn't matter what the weather is, even if it's winter, he'll start building with no shirt on.
Well, he's going to have to do, when he comes to New Zealand, he can try to do the haka with us, right? With no shirt on, because that's usually the norm, right?
That's right. If his chest isn't really red from beating it properly, he hasn't done the moves well. We have to train him.
I would crush the haka, bro. I would crush that, dude.
That's what's up, bro.
Nice. Yeah, I want to see what they call your pukana, which is your war face. I want to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I used to watch Jonah Lomu do it all the time when he is, he's still one of my heroes, man.
He's a legend.
All Blacks, baby.
One of the best. Yeah, one of the best rugby players of all time. Forward, like a massive tank of a man.
One of the best athletes of all. The Dallas Cowboys tried to draft him 2 times, and he faded millions of dollars to stay with All Blacks, stay in New Zealand, stay with his culture. There's something to be said about that. So.
Oh yeah, he's a legend still.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, man.
Context, man. Always.
Yeah. Now your net worth is your network, man. This is it, and we're going to keep pushing. Yeah, but I appreciate all you guys' time today. We'll probably wrap this up here. Does anyone want to have any closing statements? I think we unpacked a lot of stuff. Now, I hope everyone's IQ has increased during this space. I think today.
Well, I just want to tell everyone that sometimes zooming out's good. Getting some sleep. Appreciating your family and the rest, and I think there's no amount of monetary value for that. It keeps you sane, right? So,
yeah, that's it. Stay grounded, right? We're all doing this the people we hang out with. We're all doing this to better those around us. Even if you change one person's life, you change the world, right? But we're trying to make a world a better place using all these cool tools that we're pioneering and stuff that we think is right, the right way to do it. And it's not the easy way, but it's the right way.
Absolutely. All right, guys.
Cool, guys. We'll send it. Keep an eye out for that mask extension. I'll send that to you, Larry. You can get your multiple browser approach for mask, and we'll keep going, guys. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, and look out for the #AI PMT. It's coming, so sooner than later.
Oh yeah, I'm watching. I'm subscribed to notifications, like and subscribe, and everyone like all these accounts in here. They're all good people, good, amazing projects, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, Ethan, I look forward to talking to you some more because I think I probably could have some decent input. Since you're a friend of Kauri, you're a friend of mine.
Absolutely, I'm gonna reach out for sure. I'll reach out.
All right, bro. It sounds good, man.
Sweet, guys.
Talk to you guys later. Yep. Peace.
Thanks, team. See ya.